Well, I'm joined here tonight by Anna B., who some of you might know as one of the proponents behind the Blue Inferno theory, video from which I reacted to on one of my live streams back in May, I believe it was. She's quite popular on Instagram. She has a number of theories, a lot of theories actually, or a lot of videos explaining her theories, I should say, on Instagram. So make sure to go check her out over there if you haven't already. The main purpose of this conversation tonight is not to have a debate or even really an interview about her ideas and theories, but rather give her a chance to help me understand what it is that she thinks and why. So those of you who are watching, if you disagree with anything I say or anything she says, that's perfectly fine. In fact, I would love to hear what your counter arguments might be from either of our theories in the comments, but try to keep it respectful. If you say something like, this is stupid, that won't necessarily get your comment deleted, but it's not the most helpful thing. With that being said, I'm going to turn over to Annabeth to introduce herself very briefly, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Anna B. I started making 21 Pilots videos because I wrote a book and it's about a fictional band and mental health, and so I've been a 21 Pilots fan since the Vessel era. So it just made sense. I was like, there is a crossover between who I think will enjoy my book and 21 Pilots fan base, and yeah, that's kind of kind of how it all snowballed.
Yeah, awesome. What's the name of the book?
It's called Stay With Me.
You said it's about a fictional band, right? You might have mentioned, what's the name of the band?
320 Sycamore.
Awesome. Well, go check that out if you haven't already read it. Those of you who are watching. So the first thing that I wanted to discuss and talk about was this new idea that sprung up in the past couple of weeks, fueled by these images that are coming out of the web series that they've done for the Breach Tour. These pictures of the 3 sign and then other references to the number 3 that have been circulating around. I discussed this very briefly about 2 weeks ago, but the only thing I could find was really just speculation that something is going on. They are teasing something, but not really an understanding of what that even would be. And so hopefully you can shed some more light on that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what that is, because the only conclusion I've come to so far is that they're just trolling us, which isn't the most satisfactory answer.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts? What do you think is going on with those?
Well, my friend Zertana, she actually just delved in. She was like, I think there are 3 alternate endings because for the longest time I was hammering home about how I think it's duality, and I still do believe in the duality aspect of the story, but I think she is really onto something because we had the 3 different box sets. And so I thought that was kind of strange whenever Breach released. I'm literally I'm looking at them on my shelf. That's why but I was like, okay, I don't know what this means. At the time when I originally first started making videos, I thought that Nova Bishop was maybe someone that we hadn't seen, but I now understand that that is Clancy and Blurryface in one, like reuniting, essentially. But Zertana connected the 3 box sets with the 3 ways presented in Morph. So above, under, or around. And I went and read a little more about that on Lyrics Genius because, again, this wasn't my theory. So it was about nihilism, which I think belongs to Breach or Nova Bishop, and then Dark Clancy would be humanism, and Torchbearer would be theism. And so it's kind of presenting you with all of these options. And so in that case, we have now seen nihilism play out and humanism play out. But we haven't seen theism play out. And so that makes sense to me. And also, since I think that Torchbearer is the Holy Spirit, it makes sense the triune God, 3 in 1, why we're seeing like all the 3s.
It would be nice to have some kind of explanation given to us for those box sets. The instinctual interpretation that I always had when they came out was these are 3 different characters, and 2 of them are hand in hand, being Dark Clancy becomes the Nova Bishop. But I also can understand why it would make more sense to have those be different figures, because 2 box sets for the same figure, when one of them, as you mentioned, the Nova Bishop is kind of already 2 figures in one anyway. I'm curious, just going back for a minute, to the nihilism and humanism elements and theism. So theism is the Torchbearer, nihilism is the Nova Bishop, Clancy becoming Blurryface, like we see in City Walls.
Yes.
Uh, so is humanism? You said we've seen humanism.
I think so. I think Clancy is humanism and kind of like he goes as far as he can. And this kind of I've talked a lot about sleep and like just the persistence of sleep like throughout their discography. And so I think that, in that lullaby part of Paladin Strait, and I'm not sure if it's in the video, so correct me if I'm wrong. It may not be. I feel like it might have been cropped out of the video. But in the song, there's like this little lullaby part. And so I think that he fell asleep, and then the nightmare is Breach and City
Okay.
Walls. So,
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So the humanism would be the Clancy that we see in Breach, or the Clancy that we see in Clancy?
the Clancy that we see in Paladin, because I still
Okay,
feel like I don't know, that's where it gets a little murky for me, but
sure.
I think the humanism aspect is he falls asleep on the mountain because I think he's using psychokinesis to help Torchbearer carry out Torchbearer's plan, but kind of like the disciples falling asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane, like he still failed. Like even if he's not fighting on the ground, he's using his psychokinesis to help fight. Like who the person in the mask I don't believe is the Clancy that we know. Like he is using psychokinesis to control someone else that is in the mask, I think. And I think we kind of see that in concerts as well, right? Because we figure out that he's not the one on the stage and then he like pulls off the mask when he's up high.
Yeah, and we also see that in Overcompensate, right? Like we see at the end of Overcompensate that he's been controlling someone through psychokinesis, but that doesn't negate the fact that we still are able to see their face in the music video, which
Yeah.
is its own thing to wrestle with. But given that we have Overcompensate and we know what happens in Overcompensate,
Right.
that means the fact that we see Clancy's face at the end of Paladin Strait doesn't negate what you're saying. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I've always understood the Mountain Clancy and the Tower Clancy in Paladin Strait to be two different figures. They're both Clancy, but they're two different versions. But that
Right.
gets into a whole other
Which I
story
do
arc
think
theory
is
that I have.
possible, by the way. I'm not as
Sure.
well versed, but like I don't think like I don't write that off at all. I do think that's possible.
So with this idea of there being three endings, what would if there's a third ending on the way, what do you think the two endings are that we've been given so far?
I think it just kind of shows you like you can only go so far by yourself. I think the humanism one is just like we're prone to fail, like even if we give our very best, whatever that may look like. And then nihilism is us just like accepting that the world is terrible and you might as well not try. Um, and then theism would then be like choosing to let God like help you fight your battles or fighting your battles for you.
And so the theism one is the one that would be on the way that they
Yes.
would be teasing. And then is there a sense in which through Breach we saw endings or just examples of these mindsets?
I think that intentions just it never sat right with me personally. And I do think that each song on Breach can kind of be tied back to fear or doubt or like some aspect of that, right? Like insecurity in some way. Um and I mean even like raw fear, and it has like like a super powerful bridge and I think a lot of people connect with that, but it's still just like it's sad. Like, if you really think about it, it's sad. Like, it's a poisonous progression. Like, it's never gonna get any better. And Intentions kind of has that same, like, resigned mindset of, like, all you can do is, like, try again the next day. Like, that's not talking about, like, cycles being broken or, like, things improving. Because, I mean, we see, right? Like, he's only improved this much after all that fighting.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Where would you place something like Drag Path in all of this?
Drag Path is my favorite 21 Pilots song. It's actually what sent me down this like rabbit hole because I would say I was like a very basic enjoyer of the lore. Actually, when they started in Trench, I was living overseas and I didn't get to see the Bandito tour, so I kind of fell out. Like I didn't understand what they were trying to do. But then I came back during Scaled and Icy and I really liked it because it vaguely reminded me of, like, The Hunger Games, like, the show, like, the creepy bishops as the hosts and everything, and so then but recently, when Drag Path came out, I felt I don't know, like, I just felt in my soul that it wasn't over. It was a very hard feeling to explain, but specifically because he's like, "Evidence I left there on purpose, evidence for you to unravel." It felt kind of like a directive, like, "This is what you should do." And I used to teach English, I write my own books, I love lyrics specifically, like, I love unpacking all kinds of artists' lyrics, and so I was like, "Okay, he's telling me that there's evidence, and I'm gonna find it." And so then I just, like, started unraveling the evidence. So I do think Drag Path is like the beginning of the theism end.
Okay. All right. So it's almost bridging the gap between
Yes.
Breach and Blue Inferno for the sake of uh,
Yes.
a name. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, just going back real quick, because you mentioned Paladin Strait has this sense of him falling asleep into the nightmare that is then Breach. And I think what's interesting about that is in the contract, we get this really weird music video where it picks up right where Paladin Strait left off, but isn't really addressed by City Walls.
Right.
Um, and it's kind of this blip. Like if you consider the timeline like this, and we've got Paladin Strait and then City Walls, there's like this dip in the middle where the contract comes in and does its own thing.
Yes.
Um, but that could be perhaps the nightmare, or a an image of the nightmare that is then going to unfold with Breach. Would that make sense to say?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
and it does have like very dreamlike imagery, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of the complicated thing about this whole thing because I think it got a little murky and I don't know if they like intended to do this or like what really their plan was, but to me, like the whole thing is a dream. Like the whole like this whole thing is a dream sequence. And so it would be kind of like Inception. Like he fell asleep within his own dream type of thing.
Yeah, and that I've always been fully on board with. The dream within a dream, this whole world of Dima is a dream that happens. I mean, I think a lot of what we see in Routines in the Night at the beginning and end of that video really hints towards this idea that uh he's falling asleep into this world of, I guess, this living nightmare that he's struggling to get out of, but it's almost like the world of Dima and Trench is a nightmare that he must defeat in order to stop having the nightmare, if that
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. Like it's going to be a continuous nightmare every single night until he figures out how to conquer it. Um, so yeah, I'm fully on board with the dream idea and more dreams within dreams, and especially how that relates to the way in which time works within this world. I guess my question before we move on from the three idea is, what would you say is the most uh, compelling piece of evidence that the three signs are pointing us towards something and not just signage that exists?
Me personally, like I'm not against it pointing to something, but I'm also not like it has to point to something. To me, I've found so much more substantial evidence that that feels like a pebble in the ocean, and I'm like, great, if it's pointing to the three different endings, or Torchbearer being three in one, or like the blurry face circles being three by three by three, like great. But me personally, that's just not like, like, that's not a hill that I'm willing to die on, I guess.
So let's talk about the other ideas that you have, the ones that you are willing to die on. Not to be dramatic, but before we launch fully into this, I did have a clarifying question, which is, what name do you subscribe to? Because I know you've mentioned and put forward the idea of the Blue Inferno theory,
Um
or have you not?
Yes, I have, I absolutely have.
Okay,
That's the problem, I think, with the what I've done. It's just, like, I don't even consider them theories. I consider it more of just, like, compiling evidence, which is why I have all
sure.
these little videos, and so it's like if you come to my page, you're probably gonna be a little confused if I just pick up where I left off. But it really is that's what convinces me more than, like, one specific theory that I've come up with or anything. It's just, like, all of these pieces of evidence, like, too many loose ends for it to not lead anywhere, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, I did start with, like, the Blue Inferno theory. That was, like, one of my earliest ones, I think.
Well, maybe let's put this a simpler way: the ninth album theory. right? Like there's going
Yeah.
to be a ninth album. The
Yes.
the main point of clarification, what I was really getting at is, are you someone who uses the terminology the triple album theory, or do you have thoughts on that? Because I know that's been like a sticking point for some people, not
I
necessarily
think
related to
that
your ideas,
we're
but
on the
just
same page. To me, it just makes more logical sense to call it the ninth album, but calling it the
okay,
third album, I'm fine with that. Like, I just call it that because I think it's like the just the final piece. So it's the same as the third album theory, I think, and kind of goes along with the box sets and stuff.
sure, okay, okay, cool. So I can use the words interchangeably, and it won't be like
Yes. Yes.
misdescribing what you're actually doing. Okay, cool. So that being said, like what in short, I know you just said that there's a number of different pieces of evidence you've been compiling that lead you to this conclusion, or have continued to reinforce this idea. But if you could, what would be like a one or two sentence summary of what it is in short that you believe?
I guess what comes to mind is the lyric, "I created this world to feel some control, destroy it if I want." And that has always felt like the thesis statement of the story to me, and we haven't seen it be destroyed yet. So I would say that for one. And then I mean, people are gonna be like, "Whoa, you're going way too far back beyond the story," and that's valid, but I do think he's been very clever in weaving in old things. Even if he didn't have the story fleshed out or maybe didn't even have the idea for it yet, as a writer myself, I can see his craftsmanship in, like, pulling in, like, old motifs and stuff like that, and so I guess the other thing I would say is from Drown, where he talks about he will try 9 times. Yeah, you know that line?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah.
9 lives and keep climbing for the prize again or yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I don't remember the exact quote either, but I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. No. I mean, I fully agree with that as well. I've gotten some pushback for how staunchly I defend the idea that there should be more attention paid to the story that we see pre Blurryface. And I think these days most people would agree it's a little reductive to just call everything Blurryface through Breach, like the entire story, limit it just to
Yeah, yeah.
Blurryface through Breach, because whether it was retroactively done or not, there are a number of references from Vessel in very lore, explicitly lore songs and videos. City Walls comes to mind as a prime example, but there are even just things like the Violent Island and things like that that we see throughout the letters and things like that. So, Vessel at the very least is included, but I also think there's plenty of evidence from everything before that as well that, at the very least, like you said, has themes and motifs he continues to draw upon as he continues to build out the story. So the main thing that we're waiting for in a very reductive way, very simplistic way, is to see the destruction of the world that is yet to come.
And the other thing that comes along with that, I think, is that Torchbearer is victorious in whatever way that may be. I don't really have a specific. I mean, I have a semi-specific actually, but yes, just the world will be destroyed. Torchbearer will be the one that allows that to happen.
How do you imagine that will happen? It's okay if this is an idea that you end up changing later. I'm not asking you to commit to anything now, but like, how would you imagine Torchbearer causing the destruction of the world? Is this through Clancy, or is it almost like what we almost saw in City Walls, where he's trying to break down the door and get in the room with Blurryface himself?
Yeah, so this is kind of where everything gets, I won't say murky. I don't think it's murky. It makes a lot of sense to me. So we see the Blue Inferno in the outside music video, and Keon's is mentioned in the very first letter that Clancy ever posted to the or like the Demo org site or whatever. And as an English teacher, I was like, you do not mention a character who is not important in the very first letter. So, I believe that so I think that Torchbearer is the Holy Spirit because we kind of get that vibe in navigating, like he's walking through the forest alone, but he's not alone. And I think Keon's represents Jesus, and that's because he sacrificed himself so that Torchbearer and Clancy could get away. But it's not just Torchbearer, because in that sense, Keon's and Torchbearer are the same person. So I think that he's gonna find out that Blurryface participated in the killing of Keon's, and maybe, like, Keon's face could morph and, like, reveal that he is also Torchbearer. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah,
Something like
I can
that.
imagine it. Yeah, I can picture what you're saying. Yeah.
So
Okay. And so that would happen like in the tower in the outside as he's killing Keon's. We'd get like a flashback, right? It recreates the scene. He's killing Keon's and Keon's turns into
right.
the torchbearer or like fades in and out with the torchbearer's face. Okay.
Something like
Interesting.
that. There is, I think it's in Nico and the Niners. There is a graphic when I saw them back in uh March. Is it April? The AT&T festival, whatever. It's probably been at all the festivals. But it's like Torchbearer in this divine glow. And I was like, "Is that always been there?" Like, I don't know, because I wasn't always paying attention to the graphics even though I've seen them a lot, but now instead of looking at them, I've been looking behind them. So I kind of imagine it like that, just like eth ethereal, divine, I don't know.
Interesting. That I mean, it would be a cinematic moment for sure. Would that because of that, do you think that the outside has a different place in the timeline than what we know it to have, or not know it, but what we've been shown so far, right? Like right now, it sits between Scaled and Icy and Clancy. Um,
Okay, this is where it genuinely does get messy and murky to me, but I do think that there is a reversal thing going on here. And it does make some sense because in Clancy, he I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to express what I'm thinking, but I have tried to watch the music videos in reverse, and so I'm like, there is something there, but I keep getting hung up on it. But I do really think that Scaled and Icy and Trench coincide somehow because we see the big nose scar fading in Trench.
See, this is interesting because I don't actually know at this point if I've ever made this idea into a theory or a video, um, or like fully fleshed it out. But I have definitely bounced around the idea in my head and in my notes, if you will, um, of this story playing backwards and forwards because there is a lot of evidence of that being the case. Where I ultimately went with that was this idea of two converging timelines being two Clancys, and that's why I mentioned this a moment ago the idea of the Mountain Clancy and the Tower Clancy and Paladin Strait being two different people, and so that was sort of the way I was able to reconcile it. But am very much I very much want to be convinced of the idea that there's a reversal at play, and the main reason is because Trench seems so central to the story. Like it's not a character album in the way that Blurryface or Clancy are, and it's not a propaganda album, and it's not like what I see as the ending album or maybe the penultimate ending album, Breach. But it's like just laying the map for this world of Trench. It's named after the world, and music reversals are a huge part of that album, both in the songs and in the videos. I mean, we have this weird reversed moment. We have several weird reversed moments in Nico and the Niners, including one in which the Banditos start backing out of the door they came out of earlier. Do you see it bouncing back and forth where like one timeline is going forward and the other backwards and there's an album in which they converge, or is everything actually moving backwards towards Trench as the ending and Breach is more at the beginning or something like that? Or is it messier than that?
It is messier than that, I think, but I really this is what really obviously Donnie Darko and like if you've seen the movie, like everything gets reversed and he's like, I am Donnie Darko. And I was like, okay, like there's something to reversal here. And even in Drag Path, you get that little tidbit at the beginning that
Yes.
sounds like the reverse
Yep.
sound. And anyway, my
Intentions.
friend reversed that song, and to me, I really do think that there's a whole song underneath there. There's just too many like full words that make sense. But when I was starting to watch the music videos backwards, the main thing that stuck out to me was that that City Walls ends with like Torchbearer's theme and he's looking devastated. But then when you're watching the story, like the playlist that they have made, the very next video is Torchbearer's video. And so I'm kind of under the impression that we've gotten all of Clancy's perspective, but now we're gonna like see it from Torchbearers in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. It's a good point because we got I Am Clancy and then we got the album Clancy, which was like the character album of Clancy, if you will. But then right before City Walls came out, which wasn't before Breach was announced, right? Like it didn't line up as cleanly as I Am Clancy did in terms of album rollout. Right before that, we got City Walls, which wasn't really from the Torchbearer's perspective. Like scenes of it were, but the core story arc isn't his perspective. Um, so yeah, that is an interesting point that we haven't seen what we were made. What's the word? What's the best way of putting this? We didn't see what we should have seen based off of what they showed us before. I'm Clancy followed with Clancy's perspective. I'm Torchbearer didn't follow the Torchbearer's perspective. So that is an interesting point. Okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but the Breach rollout was so weird compared to what we got with Breach, right? Like there was so much analog horror themed stuff with all of the songs, and then that weird like silent thing where you just hear his pencil writing all the track list on the notepad, and it was like all very eerie. And then the second track is Raw Fear, which is like not an eerie song at all. So it was a bit of whiplash there. I don't know. I wasn't going anywhere with that. It's been an interesting element of the Breach rollout. Yeah, it's weird. But anyway, leaving that aside for a moment, in brief, sort of what's your idea with Tyler's notepad? And the main question I had is, how do you see the columns relating to the albums?
Yeah, so obviously the line that sparked it all was I write a promise in pencil, but my loyalty's in pen because he's not really an Instagram poster. Like he'll post an occasional story, but the fact that both of those are still on his page, very suspicious in and of itself. And so when I looked at that page, the first thing that came to mind was not the Blurryface circles, it's why are they out of order? It's very strange. Like he knows the order of his albums. He's a very meticulous person, so very weird. But also, I agree. I thought that the Breach rollout was way too like upfront. Even the letter that he wrote, that everybody refers back to, where he's like, "This," he said it's the end, so it's the end. And I'm like, but even he said it's the end of that story. That is a very specific way of wording it. Very suspicious. And now we know that they have played tons and tons of festivals and still have more before the year is up. And so it all seems a little weird and suspicious.
The main sticking point or the main confusion I had with your explanation of the columns lining up with albums was how that seventh and final column lined up with Regional at Best, I think is what you said, or the seventh album.
Yes.
Because I was following you up until there, but then I'm confused about that one because it includes more songs than just Regional at Best. Could
Yes.
you like expand upon that a little bit, and then like you can take it into the 8th and ninth albums as well?
For sure. So I think it's Heathens and Level of Concern that are there as well, along with the regional at best track list. And to me, Heathens fits right in with regional at best because it's like a very spiritual album, like, versus their other stuff. So Level of Concern kinda throws me, but not enough because it's the only outlier. So, everything else is kind of, like, in that spiritual vein because I also think that Heathens is. And so, yeah, I think that I thought he just didn't put them on on its own album because he had already written out the Vessel tracks. But the reason that I came to that conclusion is more of like Breach came next, and so I think that that is the other red circle. And so that's kind of where I made that decision, I think, more than making it's because of Breach came next.
So one of the like more interesting things in this notebook that you already pointed out is how the albums are placed out of order. And I think it's interesting to bring that into connection with the nine circles. Really, my only sticking point with doing that is I'm still on the fence about there being a ninth album, and so it's like, is there an empty circle if we do that kind of thing? You are right that Blurryface and Breach line up with those red ones. And then it's interesting that, if I'm remembering this correctly, Vessel would be behind the eye circle. Is that correct? When we're
Yes.
thinking about I guess I have it behind me. Yes, the eye circle. Why is that? Why would you? And it's okay if you don't know or don't have an idea, but like, why would Vessel be the eye?
Faith is to be awake.
Okay, all right, yeah, that I could see that. One of the interesting things, I guess, about the Blurryface album cover, obviously, it has the 9 circles that correspond to the 9 bishop or the 9 towers on the map, but it also corresponds to a face, and there's like the face of Blurryface, presumably, and everything's contained within him. The only other thing I was wondering about the notepad is, if this is a reordering of the story, what would that new story arc look like, and how potentially does that relate to the reversal of time that you mentioned a moment ago?
I like this order better than like when I'm watching it in reverse. I will say that. When I'm watching the videos in reverse, it gets way too muddy and I'm like, I don't know. But when I'm looking at this, not in reversal order, just in the order that he has written it out, I could see this being like the order that it plays out because I feel like in Trench, he becomes a bandito, like with the flowers and everything. And then he goes in undercover, right? Because he's not wearing bandito colors. And to me, that is like Tyler becomes a Christian, but he's putting on, you know, the coat, like he's putting on a face. I wish that I had two faces to prove which theory works. Clancy mask coat to go in to people who are in Dima.
Can you talk a little bit more about the red eras and the red circles?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
to my mind, there are 3 red eras, not 2, and the 3 being Clancy, Blurryface, and Breach, not just Blurryface and Breach.
Yes.
How would you like reconcile that? What would you see Clancy as if not a red era?
I feel that Clancy is equally yellow and red. And even in Overcompensate, he's like prodigal son, done running, come up with Josh Dunn. And that to me right there is like he is letting the good part of him, like the Clancy part of himself is winning over Blurryface. Um, and even on the cover, like it's just not completely red. Obviously, Blurryface is black mostly. But it was also setting up kind of like the idea of the story and everything. So,
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm fully on board with with Blurryface being a red era
okay.
and Breach being a red era. I just instinctively always put Clancy into one as well. That's
And
something
it's a
I'm willing to be
different
convinced
red,
on.
if I'm not mistaken. Like the red of Clancy is like, um,
It's a lighter red, yeah.
yes,
I know what
yes.
you're saying. Yeah, it's not the Blurryface red in the same way.
I knew one other thing I was gonna say. They're dressed so similarly to the Blurryface era as well. Like that, I think that's kind of what solidifies that, and because he becomes Nova Bishop, which is Blurryface. So I think do you know what I'm saying? Like I think all of those things combined, but they really do look so similar. When I was looking at the photos, the only difference is like Josh had like completely red hair, but I mean they brought back the red eyeliner for Breach, and he did have like a little bit of red hair, just not as the full thing. But
Yeah, no, I mean that's a fair point. I mean that may be a better way for me to think about it than color eras, but rather these are the 2 Blurryface eras.
also, what is very interesting, this is not my like listing the bishops with the circles. This is not something I did. This is just something I found online. But the circle attributed to Nico is not the blurry face circle. It is the breach circle.
Oh, okay.
So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Listo is the blurry face circle, I think. And then
Okay.
Nico is the breach one. If we're looking at it in order of albums.
Yeah, so I mean, bit of a tangent again, but those circles have always interested me because if you they're presented in different ways, and there's the way Dima presents them, but then if you rotate it east is up, you get a different ordering.
I might have to try that and see if it
Yeah.
gives me story clarity from that. It's interesting you mentioned that because I haven't played much with like tilting it to east, but there is in the digital remains. I don't know if it's in, I think it's in Breach. It's in Breach or Clancy digital remains, but there are like four different. I don't know if you know the graphic I'm talking about. But there's like four different layouts of the circles. Like it's in like note form.
So it might be in the digital remains. I think it's definitely in the end credits of City Walls, where they
Okay.
have like the note, the
Yes.
whole all like the storyboards almost drawn out. It isn't really storyboards, but like the concept designs
Yes.
for the entire
Yes.
story drawn out. And yeah, it has all of them, and it has different violation codes for
And I
each rotation
I think
as well.
that's something. I haven't been able to crack it, but I think it's something. It reminded me when you said maybe we should tell like change our perspective. I was like, yeah, probably.
That is something to revisit in some form. Don't know what to do with it. I've
Me
looked at
either.
those
Me neither.
myself and puzzled on it, but it's a bit of a thinker. So this was another part of this that I was a little curious to get more of your thoughts on, because I find it fascinating the way the English language, and especially Old English, plays in with the words that Tyler uses.
Mm,
And so you mentioned nils being related to an Old English word nil,
yes.
and that means, what does it mean? I'm forgetting now. I know
I
it's
think
related to willy nilly, but what does nil itself
yes,
mean?
it's like will I, nil I, like will I,
Okay.
won't I, just in an
Yeah.
older way. I don't know that much about Nils. We don't get that much about him, but there is one letter about him, and he seems very fatherly. Like he keeps because the citizen of Dema is kind of asking themselves like, were they always bishops? Because it seems like maybe not, because I was about to fall out of a window when I was young and Nils saved me or something like that. It's been a while since I've read it. Yeah, I don't know all that much about Nils. I just found it very interesting because of all of the other evidence for duality that I had accumulated to that point, that we again have that duality, like in the choice, right? Like take the jacket, don't take the jacket. So
And that's interesting actually now that I think about it. The Nils letter, it almost seems like that citizen sees Nils as having a dual nature, because he or she, I can't remember who the author of that letter is shocked that Nils did that. Like there's an element in which Nils was a foreboding, formidable bishop who then has this moment of kindness peeking through. And I think what's interesting is Keon's obviously has a much more surface level kindness based off of at least Clancy's letters. But then Nils has a little bit more peeking through, and it almost implies that like they're under varying degrees of control to the like dark side, the Blurryface side of the story.
yeah, yeah, it's really, really interesting. Because like this is where people are like, I don't understand how you can think that Keon's is Jesus. And it's because I'm like, you have to remember this is all taking place in Tyler's mind, and it's through his mind's eye. Because they're like, well, Jesus could never be a bishop, he's not evil. And I'm like, but it is Blurryface who is doubting his goodness, right? But we see him sacrifice himself and be killed by the bishops so that Clancy can escape. Um, and I wonder if it's something similar with Nils, right? And this is a very like I have no evidence to support this, but I think it would be awesome if Nils turned out to be God because then you would have Keon's beginning the story, God ending the story, and Torchbearer was there throughout.
Do you know which circle slash album Nils lines up with? I think you
Yes,
said in the video, I just don't remember.
the Goner Circle. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the very
And so
final
that's, oh, that's the very final one. Okay,
the
yeah, yeah.
birds, yeah.
Going back to the notebook for a second, what do you make of the fact that two songs are missing from Blurryface?
Well, Not Today kind of gives us a little bit about city walls. Although it seems like it's from a different choice. So we got the choice that's not today, if that makes sense. Not today would be like, nope, I'm not gonna give back into my old self. But I the line tore the curtains down, windows open now, make a sound. Like that calls to mind to city walls, and obviously they're planning ahead. So I was like, maybe that's why it was left off. I think There is so much to be said about the things that they leave out, and I think that's some of their biggest clues to what is coming in the end. And then for Goner, I think they left that off, and he even pointed it out on his Twitter, and he was like, "Oops, left Goner off."
I wonder if there's a way you can connect the relationship between Heavy Dirty Soul and Goner to City Walls and Drag Path,
Mm,
where Heavy Dirty Souls, can you save me? Essentially, hey, save my Heavy Dirty Soul. And then Goner's Don't Let Me Be Gone. Um, and then we get. I don't think he says Don't Let Me Be Gone in City Walls, right? But he says Entertain My Faith and Address My
yes,
Soul,
yes.
and then Can You Save Me in Drag Path. Like those four songs definitely seem to be connected
Mhm,
very
I agree.
closely to one another. What do you think of the idea, or not the idea? What do you make of the fact that in City Walls, if we are going to have another ending, he says this is the last time that I try.
I love that line because I really do think it's the last time that he tries. I think that that is where Torchbearer's power can be fully on display. When you reach the end of yourself, um, is when God will show up. And so I don't think that was necessarily a lie in the sense of like, this is the last time that I try, because it will be through and with Torchbearer that he's able to do the very last time, I guess.
So here's my question that I think I need the most clarity on, or the one that's the biggest sticking point of all of them. Because I agree with you throughout all of this that there are a lot of loose ends. There are a lot of elements of the story that haven't been tied up. There's the fact that we don't see the world destroyed, that, you know, the way it ends in City Walls is not the ending essentially that we were promised or that's been hinted at. And it doesn't feel final. My interpretation has always been that this is all wrapped up in Dragpath, and that Dragpath itself contains the alternate ending. It just doesn't play out in a music video. It doesn't play out as cinematically, lyrically either. But it's Dragpath describes all these encounters of the devil, and then succumbing to the devil, and so on and so on. And then at the end, he is found. And instead of the torchbearer trying to beat down the door, the torchbearer does beat down the door. He makes it in, and he finds him, and we get that resolution. But because it comes right at the end of Dragpath and everything that Dragpath's about, this ending, this other version of the story, the other ending, isn't something that they're going to show us, but is rather a future hope that exists that they describe in Dragpath, but we don't get to see it because Tyler hasn't seen it yet. If Dragpath is in some ways, and maybe you don't agree with this interpretation, but if Dragpath's an alternate version of City Walls, that to me presents the duality that you use as like an indication of there being more. And so I see it reconciled in Dragpath. How do you interpret Dragpath in relation to the duality and the fact that there's going to be more?
Yeah, that's a good question. Immediately I was called back to the threes that we were talking about earlier because that was something someone pointed out to me. I can't remember their name. I'm so sorry. People send me stuff all the time, and I'm so honored because I'm like, yay! I love hearing from you guys. But I'm so sorry. If that's your theory, claim it. But where he says maybe once or twice or three, he's tried his hand at drowning me. And that kind of alludes to there being a third time. And I don't necessarily disagree with you, right? Like, if Drag Path was the only ending we got, I wouldn't be unsatisfied. I think people kind of expect me to be really disappointed, but it is when their entire discography is telling me otherwise. And specifically, I take a lot from Regional at Best. And I think, again, with them leaving off Not Today, with them leaving off Goner, with them not playing Car Radio and Holding On to You, like on the Breach set list, all of these things being kind of hidden below the surface. I mean, same with Regional at Best, right? They've never released it. It's because it is all pointing to the final victory, in my opinion. And so yeah, and I just think Drag Path is just giving us a taste of that. And I felt like, okay, you were telling me to go find the evidence, like, there's something more beyond Drag Path. And they were also recruiting banditos on the Breach tour. Why are you recruiting banditos if it's over? If it really, because we had already gotten City Walls at that point. Why are you handing out Join the Resistance? It seemed like now is the time for us to rise up, like, now is the time for faith to be awake, like faith is to be awake. Like to me, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense in relation to what you were saying, but I kind of went off on my own tangent.
No, it does. I mean, basically, the main thing I was getting at is why are you unsatisfied with Dragpath being the ending? And you did address that. So,
There is a lot in Drag Path that leads me to believe that there is another ending, and the other is proof is in the adversary, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's Blurryface." I don't believe that is who is being referred to in Drag Path. I believe that is the necromancer who represents the devil. There are there is a new symbol in the Breach Digital Remains that was also on Clancy Tour, I think. I have a picture of it on my phone. I believe that to be the necromancer symbol, like we have Blurryface's face.
yeah, it's interesting because it's like the dark version of Blurryface, if such a thing is possible.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when I hear proof is in the adversary, I don't hear blurry face because Tyler reminds everyone every time he sings stressed out, what's my name? And then he's even been recently saying, what's your name? Like we are not the greater evil at play here. And I think that's kind of what the line in Drag Path is getting at. Like because Torchbearer has an adversary, like the light has the darkness. And there is a letter, I think it's from the Scaled and Icy era, and I quote it a lot with in relation to the necromancer stuff. And it's where he says, "Am I like are the bishops being controlled by something else, someone else?" And so I do think that that is like the darker evil. And again, it plays into the nine circles being inspired by Dante's Inferno. And so obviously, if we're getting to the deepest ninth layer of hell, that's where the devil resides.
It's interesting that that question came to mind for Clancy during the Skilled and Icy era, because in Dante's Inferno, the devil is frozen in ice at the bottom of hell. I think the place where you and I differ the most is I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I just don't agree with the conclusion that that means we're going to get more, because I think the way they ended it is we've given you the story, we've given you a hint at what ultimately is the conclusion of the story, but we're not showing you anymore. I wanted to hear more about your Donnie Darko thoughts. We never actually touched upon that.
Oh, I love this question. So I actually had never seen Donnie Darko. I literally watched it for lore purposes. I literally went back and forth because I'm terrified of scary things. And I was like, if it's scary, I can't. But one of my friends was like, no, no, watch it. You're not gonna be scared. And I was like, okay, I trust you. So I went in and man, like there's just so much. There is a line in it that's like destruction is a form of creation. I was like, I created this world to feel some control, destroy it if I want. Like I was like, hello. But the main thing that I think I took away, other than like everything is reversed by Donnie's sacrifice, is the fear and love like chalkboard. And that is really truly why I think we're getting another ending. I'm like, if this is his like magnum opus, like if this is what inspired him to make a story of his own, we've got the fear ending. We have that. Now we just need to get the love ending where Clancy is operating not out of fear. Um, so I think that's mostly also like the eye, like Donnie Darko, like the blue eye, and we got the blue eye at the end of the AMA's performance, when it was all blue and stuff. And I feel like people really tossed that under the rug. I was like, we haven't seen this amount of blue, like ever. The portal that opens in Donnie Darko. There is a picture from the Clancy journal that looks exactly like that.
As we start wrapping up here, I think my final big question is what's like your biggest what's your most convincing argument for people like me who see this like disconnect between the double album theory and the triple album theory, where the double album theory had them hinting there was going to be more and the triple album theory has them saying there isn't going to be more.
For me, it's the way that Tyler has been acting on stage. He's been way more open about like what their music is about, maybe than ever before since he was very, very young. Just like on his knees in a prayerful, worshipful way, and like surrendering his mic and his uke and um yeah, and to me, I'm like, he has no reason to be doing that now if it's really over. Um, that's one of the main things that I mean, he drew a cross on his arm during the Breach tour. Like, I'm like, where is all of this? I'm like, okay, maybe he's just doing it because he wants people to be able to find the spiritual references in their music and maybe, be able to know God through that. I don't know. But also just everything that they've been posting about, like, Josh is the focal point. He's the new focal point of everything on Instagram. Like, and even recently, Mace posted, like, with his sticks and the little thing that he does, and I'm like, "That is going to be Torchbearer's power move." It's like this, or like the Ned antlers, like, and it's just so reoccurrent, and I'm like, "Yeah, maybe we don't get that album this year," but, like, I truly believe, like, that is going to be the ending, because, and I've also talked about this, Tyler has a lot of tattoos that all relate to his faith, blah blah. And then we got the lyric tattoos only hurt when meaning fades. I think my skin got worse for good intentions. He only has one tattoo that I believe relates to 21 Pilots directly, not just like to his faith or like something personal to him. And only one, and it's the one like right here, and I believe it stands for I will tell you what I can, but your mind will take a stand. I sing of a greater love. Let me know when you've had enough. And there's just so many little pieces on Regional at Best, and just so many things, again, that we haven't seen, and I could go on about them but there's, like, so many references to, like, weather, a storm, like, an impending storm coming, like, even back on Regional at Best, quickly moving towards the storm, and then we get, like, I wanted to fly, but they say a system's coming in. Like, we also get so many lyrics alluding to him flying. Sometimes we will die, and sometimes we will fly away, and I think that's my strongest thing, and that's where my duality thing came from, is there's just so many lyrics that you can pull, like, "Empty sky, no way, that's me, 'cause one half of my heart is free. Empty sky, no way, that's me, 'cause the other half of my heart's asleep," like, and then Drag Path to me almost echoed Clear, because wanna know what I believe, it's right here, dig a little deeper and it's crystal clear. I dug my heels into the gravel as evidence for you to unravel, and so it just kind of like all of these things are just compiling to telling me that there has to be something more, and also, if we are gonna say that that little paper that he wrote out is the thing, we're only one album away, and I'm like, "Why would he leave this incomplete?" He wouldn't.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I'll have to sit with it more to be convinced, but I think at the end of the day, if nothing else, this conversation has helped me understand better the underlying reasoning beyond just there's got to be something more. All right, well, awesome. I appreciate you sitting down and taking the time to walk me through this. It definitely helped clarify a lot of things for me. Um, I look forward to seeing what's coming next. If you have any follow-up comments or questions, feel free to comment them below this video or on any of her videos on her Instagram. That will be linked in the description, so you can find that very easily. And with that being said, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, follow her on Instagram, and have a good night.